James, episode 3 of our Genesis lecture review series. Are you excited?
I am excited. We're going to talk about evolution a lot, right?
Yeah, which is actually, that is pretty exciting because it's one of the stickier sticking points with Jordan Peterson and Christians. And then I don't really talk to anybody else, so I don't know what other people care about. I'm just kidding. Like the politics side of things is really what gets under people's skin. Not to mention like the faith side of things. He does a really good job of pissing off every different group. There's really no one that appreciates what he's doing except for, well, not no one. That's such a weird thing. Like, why is it that some people like what he does and most groups are set against the things that he says?
I think of there's a quote that I've been considering lately where it's something along the lines of honesty is a threat to social groups that like their interaction is predicated upon polite deception. And I think that's the thing is that in a lot of these lectures and a lot of Peterson's engagements, there's not much polite deception going on in his mode of communicating.
Yeah. Who said that? You?
I don't know. I heard in a video.
If you don't know, then it's you. You said it.
Is that how that works?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just said it right now. Yeah.
If you can't cite the source, then that's all you, man.
That you are the source.
Yes. Yes.
Dang.
All right. This first one, I could have had it queued up, but I didn't. I think somewhere around here, we're going to start with a concept about how the world as we know it and perceive it is formed.
Dominant hand, and people talk with their hands, like me, as you may have noticed, and we use sign language, and there's a tight relationship between the use of the hand and the use of language, and that's partly because language is a productive force, and the hand is part of what changes the world. And so all those things are tied together in a very, very complex way with this a priori structure and also with the embodied structure. And I also think that's part of the reason why classical Christianity puts such an emphasis not only on the divinity of the spirit, but also on the divinity of the body, which is a harder thing to grapple with. You know, it's easier for people to think, if you think in religious terms at all, that you have some sort of transcendent spirit that's somehow detached from the body that might have some life after death, something like that. But the Christianity in particular really insists on the divinity of the body. So the idea is that there's an underlying structure that's got this quasi-patriarchal nature, partly because it's for complex reasons, but partly because it's a reflection of the social structure as well as other things. And then that uses consciousness in the form particularly of language, but most particularly in the form of truthful language in order to produce the world in a manner that's good. And I think that's a walloping, powerful, powerful idea, especially the relationship between the idea that it's truthful speech that gives rise to the good, because that's a really fundamental moral claim. And I think that's a tough one to beat, man, because one of the things I've really noticed is, and it isn't just me, that's for sure, is that, you know, there's a lot of tragedy in life. There's no doubt about that. And lots of people that I see, for example, in my clinical practice are laid low by the tragedy of life. But I also see very, very frequently that people get tangled up in deceit, in webs of deceit that are often multiple generations long, and that just takes them out, you know. And so deceit can produce extraordinary levels of suffering that last for very, very long periods of time. And that's really a clinical truism, you know, because Freud, of course, identified one of the problems that contributed to the suffering we might associate with mental illness with repression, which is kind of like a lie of omission. That's a perfectly reasonable way to think about it. And Jung stated straight out that there was no difference between the curative psychotherapeutic effort and supreme moral effort, including truth. Those were the same thing as far as he was concerned. And Carl Rogers, another great clinician who was at one point a Christian missionary before he became more strictly scientific, he believed that it was in truthful dialogue that clinical transformation took place. And, you know, and of course, one of the prerequisites for genuine transformation in the clinical setting is that the therapist tells the truth and the client tells the truth, because otherwise, how in the world do you know what's going on? How can you solve a problem when you don't even know what the problem is? And you don't know what the problem is unless the person tells you the truth. That's something really to think about in light of your own relationships, because, if you don't tell the people around you the truth, then they don't know who you are. And maybe that's a good thing, because, well, seriously, people have reasons to lie, right? I mean, that aren't trivial. But it's really worth knowing that you can't even get your hands on the problem unless you formulate it truthfully. And if you can't get your hands on the problem, the probability that you're going to solve it is just so low.
I find it funny that we start the episode and then it's almost like just turn on a fire hose nonchalantly. It's like, all right, here we go. They just turn on a fire hose. I can't keep trying. It takes so much effort to
yes,
I don't know, just jump in like this.
This isn't a sermon. What do they call those? Those
sermon jam
rap. Yeah, it's not a sermon jam.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I start with this clip is because it's a little bit further than the very beginning, but he takes 15 minutes to get to where we just started, where it's like he's stuck in the first chapter of Genesis, and he's trying to talk to us about why it is that God is conceived of the way that he is. And so he's dealing with the angle of truthful speech, which I can't differentiate from my understanding of the logos, right? The logos is the word, and it is true in the sense that, we typically refer to it as some sort of metaphysical structure, like rationality or something like that. So the reasonableness of things. And if that is the case, and that's kind of what he's trying to say, is the biblical stories and the biblical accounts of reality they do correspond with reality. And that's what he's indicating with all of the examples that he cites there, that there is something about the way that the world comes into being that is intimately associated with this truthful speech. And so he's saying it backwards and left-handed to try to get at the problem from a different and new way so that you can see into it, because most people would hear the logos language, or maybe if you're a Christian, you would know about the reference to the word or to the logos in John and how he identified Jesus as the word become flesh. And so there's all of these sort of systematic associations that we would make through our understanding of the text that we've been presented with. But he's trying to make the case from your own life, through your own experience of the way that truthful language is what constitutes reality, and deceitful language or deceit in general contradict that truth in such a way that brings the demise of your life. And so that's pretty exciting stuff, it's one of the best representations or presentations of sort of the reality of God and how God is reality. And this series that we're doing, you and I, reviewing his lecture series, is spurred in me by this desire to revisit a place in my theological life, just in my spiritual life, that was transformational. I went from believing that deceit was probably a good idea and probably the best I could get out of life, to a place where I understood that I was messing with the fabric of reality in a way that was producing the results that I was getting. And so it straightened me out through this presentation. So anyway, I just wanted to celebrate that a little bit about what Dr. Peterson just said. Do you have any remaining thoughts from the fire hose?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. Then we'll continue.
To the animal kingdom that was being observed, and the notion that the hierarchical structure that you see that characterizes, say, mating hierarchies in chimps, for example, the idea that that was predicated on power was actually a projection of a kind of political ideology. And I thought that really bugged me for a long time when he said that, because I'd really been used to using the term dominance hierarchy. And I thought, he told me all that. I thought, that's so annoying. It's so annoying because it might be right. And then it took me months to think about it. And then I was also reading Franz de Waal at the same time, and he's a primatologist, and also Jack Panksepp, who's a brilliant affective neuroscientist who unfortunately just died. He wrote a great book called Affective Neuroscience, and for rats to play, they have to play fair or they won't play with each other. And that's a staggering discovery, right? Because anything that helps instantiate the emergence of ethical behavior in animals and that associates it with an evolutionary process, which is essentially what Panksepp was doing, gives credence to the notion that the ethics that guide us are not mere sociological epiphenomenal constructs. They're deeply rooted. If rats, and they're rats for God's sake, you can't trust them, and they still play fair, you know. And de Waal noticed that the chimp troops that he studied, it wasn't the barbaric chimp that ruled with an iron fist that was the successful ruler, because he kept getting torn to shreds by the compatriots that he ignored and stomped on. As soon as he showed some weakness, they just tear him into pieces. The chimp leaders that were stable, you know, that had a stable kingdom, let's say, were very reciprocal in terms of their interactions with their friends. And chimps have friends, and they actually last for a very long time, chimp friendships. And they were also very reciprocal in their interactions with the females and with the infants. And I thought Franz de Waal is a very smart guy. And I thought that was also foundational science, because it's really something to note that the attributes that give rise to dominance in a male dominance hierarchy, sorry to use that word, let's call it authority, that might be better, or even shudder competence, which I think is a better way of thinking about it, is that that's not predicated purely on anything that's as simple as brute power. And I think too, you know, I think as well that the idea, and this is a deeply devious and dangerous political idea in my estimation, the idea that male hierarchies are fundamentally predicated on power in a law-abiding society, I think all you have to do is think about that for like a month, say, which isn't that long, to understand how absurd that is, because most people who are in positions of authority, let's say, are just as hemmed in by ethical responsibility, or even more so than people at the other levels of the hierarchy. And we know this even in the managerial literature, because we know, generally speaking, that managers are more stressed by their subordinates than the subordinates are stressed by their managers. And that's not surprising. You know, you want to be responsible for like 200 people? You really want that? That's hard work, man. And I mean, I know it's a pain to have a boss, because you have to care about what the boss thinks. And maybe the person is arbitrary, in which case they're not going to be particularly successful. But it's no joke to be responsible for 200 people. And you have to behave very carefully when you're in a position of responsibility and authority like that, because you will get called out if you make mistakes constantly. So it's not like because you have a position that's higher up in the hierarchy that you're less constrained by ethical necessity. Now, if you're a psychopath, well, that's a whole different story. But psychopaths have to move pretty rapidly from hierarchy to hierarchy, right? Because they get found out quite quickly. And as soon as their reputation is shattered, then they can't get away with their shenanigans anymore.
Thoughts?
Well, what I was thinking about is the concept of reciprocity and its relationship to authority. I thought it was interesting for him to you know, try to find synonyms for dominance hierarchy because of how that may land upon the ears of some. But then to also get to the place that competence, like he used authority and then competence. These were like two synonyms he tried to utilize for dominance hierarchy. But that reciprocity is a chief determinant of how competent you are, at least in relationships and really just orienting yourself in society.
There's a lot of interesting stuff there about the dynamics of hierarchies. And he got into a couple words that I've been talking about with a new friend. So like authority. he switched from dominance hierarchy to authority because his friend challenged him. I kind of clipped that off in the beginning, but it was a pushback from a friend who was like, I don't think you should say dominance hierarchy. And that was the thing he was describing, being frustrated by, because he's like, it's so useful. It's like, but this is the issue. Is like his friend is identifying the thing that he ultimately critiques in the political culture, that all male hierarchies are based on power. And that's what the word dominance conveys. And so that was a good word, his friend said, for the animal kingdom or whatever. But then he was saying that even when you look at the science and the studies of these animals that are being referenced, as like, well, it's fine to say dominance for them, but even they operate at a level that is beyond just pure power and raw physical threat to their subordinates, and more at the level of reciprocity, like you were saying, and fairness and morality. And so it's like, what the hell is going on? And so looking into the biology, what's it called? Like the behavioral science of these animals, he is seeing through the work of other people. He's seeing that there's a fairness that is involved in societies of rats, right? Like the rule of thumb is, if two rats are playing and they both are satiated totally, they're not thirsty, they're not hungry, they're not tired, they're everything's taken care of. They're just playing for the fun of playing. They will jump to engage in play, and that's like measured as a metric of effort or work that they're willing to do in order to go and play with their playmates, equal to or greater than the amount when they're hungry, when they are in search of like food or water or these other things. So it's like almost a biological need for them to engage in these relational and sort of exploratory acts of play. And they're fundamentally built into humankind, because you can see in our neuroscience that we just have a circuit in our brain for play. And so like there's a part of your brain that's dedicated to this necessity of play. And so what I'm getting at is, within the play of the rats, if the rat that is larger, they did these experiments, if the rat that's larger and could win every time, they sort of like play wrestle. And so it's like if the big rat pins the little rat more than 70% of the time, then the little rat won't play the game anymore, because they don't want to get pinned all the time. Even though they can't really win, it's like if I play with my son, who's a year and a half old, and I just beat him over and over, he gets bored. But if I let him think that he's winning, then he will continue to engage in that game. And so you can see there this like proto-morality or ethic or rule, some sort of structure that makes the game possible. So it makes the relationship, the embodiment of the relationship possible. And it goes beyond mere functionality. It's not just simply for meeting immediate biological needs. It's something more than that. So this was very interesting matrix of ideas that we have here to play with. And what I've been thinking about is the word authority, because it's something that I've been talking about with my friend who's an Orthodox catechumen. And so he is in the process of, learning how to become Eastern Orthodox as a Christian. And he brings out like apostolic succession and some more abstract hierarchical concepts of the way the world works and how God created it, and the metaphysics of hierarchies that are built into the pattern of the world. And he's really talking about the same thing that Peterson's talking about here. In a couple clips, we'll get to like Peterson's pyramid array of pyramid diagram. And so it's like they're both touching on the same thing. And Peterson's aiming at it through this behavioral biology analysis, as well as your own experience with hierarchy. Like he goes into your boss and how you might think that you'd be better off without a boss, but do you really want to be the boss? Like these things are trade-offs that have consequences. And so authority, my friend is getting this from D.C. Schindler, who's a Catholic philosopher, but authority is a mediation of true authority. So, like, if you see a leader or a president or a teacher, they have been given authority from someone above them in order to accomplish some sort of task, and their authority is not their own. They don't just make it up. That would be more akin to the power structure, or like a power hierarchy, where it's just sort of like, I'm in charge because I say so, and here you go. This is what I say goes. And then the authority that's true, and he says, Peterson refers to it as competence. Competence would be a better word, he thinks. And it's like that authority is the authority that is most transparent to this hierarchical structure that is metaphysically true. And so when he opens this session talking about the way that true speech is how we construct the world around us and how good arises in this world, and what he's saying is it is what is real. And that's a very exciting and profound statement. Do you have any thoughts on that conception of authority?
Of what is of true speech being the basis of authority. That thought.
No, yeah, sure.
What
Yes.
constitutes reality?
Mhm.
I'm having a hard time because I was trying to think of like what end are we trying to bring these points to? And I see it as two different things. Like if we're talking about God's speech, which is like where we're launching from, I feel like his true speech is of obviously a different nature than our true speech, especially when it comes to authority. Um,
Mm.
because I think with our true speech as individuals that possess a seat of authority, if you will, I'm just all this is making me think of even just the role that I'm about to step back into in like a week and a half. So my mind's kind of like scurrying because the school year's about to start, and I'm almost like more terrified this year than I was last year because last year was my first year teaching. I just didn't really know what to expect, but now it's like I don't know. I feel even like less prepared than last year. Anyways, but true speech in the position of authority as a teacher in my what I'm thinking and envisioning and imagining is really just being honest about. I think you mentioned something about being a mediation of authority, and being honest about that. I'm a flawed mediator of an authority that I've been endowed with. Um, like a flawed priest, if you will, as being part of a priesthood, a royal priesthood. Um, and so, honest speech, noble speech, these concepts of nobility. Um, I think, at least, I don't know, from where I'm sitting right now, it's being honest about how ignoble I really am. And that type of honest speech we don't really see in God because obviously there's nothing ignoble about him. There's nothing um, flawed about him. And so I think all this to say, I think what ails a lot of authority and people that inhabit positions of authority is this weird understand, kind of like what he was talking about with the chimp. Like if it shows weakness, then everyone will jump onto and strip him of the position. And so there's like a weird balance of can't look too incompetent, um, but you also need to be honest about the areas that you aren't competent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in terms of social interaction, that's why that polite deception concept has really been hitting me hard, is because I think that's why that's a factor in our day-to-day interactions and social gatherings is like, if I'm too vulnerable about my incompetency, then there's not a lot of productivity that can come from that. It's like counterproductive almost. But at the same time, if I'm not honest at all about incompetency, I could become a tyrant or deluded sycophant. Is that the right word? I don't remember what sycophant means, but that feels right.
It's like somebody that kisses up to people.
Oh, so it's not quite whatever's on the other side of the sycophant. Trying to make sycophants out of people, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I think is really good about what you said is that the way I've been putting it is that certainty is almost compelled from a leader who leads by power. And so it's interesting. You went the opposite direction of like the weakness and the, like, you can't appear too weak in your leadership, or you'll get jumped because it's like a necessary function of the health of a group that their leader would be well, and so if the leader is unwell, then they should be replaced. That's the basic theory, I think, behind that. So I would go the other way and say that a weak leader wants to appear strong, and so they tend towards this certainty. And the certainty is that deceitful, I don't remember the quote that you said, the deceitful.
Polite deception.
Yes, polite deception. And so polite deception is actually, it is the thing that is destructive to the truthful speech that constitutes the good in the world. And so polite deception can help you get by. It can grease a broken wheel or a wheel without a wheel bearing or something like that, but it doesn't allow things to flourish. And so it's truly unhealthy, and it attempts to mask it, but what it really does is it limits the growth, and it ceases the growth, I would say. And so this certainty that we've associated with authority, even if you think about authorities as experts, right? That the expert class that we had to deal with about 6 years ago, the people that come out and say, this is what is settled, this is what is factual, in any domain, they are the people that are destroying that good which truthful speech has constructed. And so that's really important to know, because when you aspire to be a good leader, in whatever capacity you lead, like I believe everyone leads in, even if you just lead yourself, to some extent, you want to do that well. And so you have to know that certainty is a trap. Certainty is a trap. And that's as far as I've gotten. I've been wrestling with Grok about certainty and whether or not it exists. But I know that there are facts, but I don't know how certain they are in the way that we mean them. Because when you talk about certainty, there's a finality to it. And I don't think that that's representative of life in any way. There's a continual motion and growth to life that doesn't allow for certainty in the way that we mean it. Because there are some things that you can rely on as consistent facts. I don't like facts either, but when you say that these facts are all of the facts, when you totalize it, then you suffer the consequences of this polite deception, because it is an attempt to avoid conflict or error or failure that drives the polite deception. And the deception is that there won't be conflict or error or failure. And that's just not true. Those things will be present at all stages of growth. And they are component parts of what produces growth in the world. And so they're very important aspects. And then just quickly, the idea for us as mediations of authority, like the authority that is the logos, and we would mediate that. This is consistent with the idea of like being the imago Dei, being an image bearer of God. That idea does require humility on our part. And it is so that we can align ourselves with the truthful speech that constitutes the good in the universe. And so it's like we are, in whatever ways we are out of alignment, we are obfuscating the true authority. And then we suffer the consequences of that. And so do the people over which we have authority. And so in order to get everything properly oriented, we need to become more and more transparent. And I would say that's sort of like isomorphic, like you couldn't see a difference between us and, we say, Jesus, because in the Bible it talks about like Jesus is the perfect representation of the invisible God. And so the more Christ-like you can be, the less ignobleness that you mentioned earlier, you have to necessarily confess, which isn't necessarily true, because there's an element of that where it's like, actually, the more aware of your fallenness or your brokenness or the ways that you're different from this logos that makes up the good in the universe, the more that you actually have to confess, because you're like, in the beginning, you're like, yeah, I'm like a bad guy or whatever, but yeah, it's no big deal. And then you start to be like, oh, it's actually a really big deal. And there are so many different ways in which, as you continue to be held to a higher standard, you continue to identify ways in which you do need to step out of the way. Yeah, sorry, that was me. And I want to be more like the logos.
No, it makes me think of, it's in Ephesians. I think it's chapter 5, towards the end of it, where it's talking about, do not associate with deeds of darkness, but instead expose them, for it's shameful even to mention what the world does in the dark. But we are children of light and not the night. And it says something along the lines of about like to be shedding light, and then all that is brought into the light becomes light. And it's a weird thought where, as you're talking about with like, the more we grow in nobility, the more we actually confess the ignoble aspects, the more it's transferred into, it's almost like an alchemical type of thing. You take this ignoble thing, apply truth, or actually just confess the reality, confront it and confess it, proclaim it, bring it into the light. And then that ignoble thing now becomes noble. That dark thing now becomes light when you bring it into the light, like a source of illumination. That's the weird thing about speaking the truth about what is corrupted. When you actually bring corruption into light, that corrupted thing now becomes a factor that even creates more light, almost like the whole, what Jesus says with the woman at the well, like, anyone who drinks of me will have, was it like the wellspring of life flowing from them? They themselves will then become also a well that other people can get water from. It's like almost that type of motif as well. It's like this corrupted thing now becomes a thing that actually frees others from corruption. And so I forget what Ephesians verse that is, but yeah, all that's brought into the light becomes light. That's the thing about honest speech, is that it can take a bad thing and make it really, really not just like good, like it makes it better. It's like it now also becomes a source of good, if you will. Regeneration.
Yeah, and I think that's what growth is. Like Jesus talks about that in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, you've heard it said to love your neighbor or whatever, something like that. And then I say to you, love your enemy. And so he's like busting these people's concept of reality. And they're like, wow, I thought I was doing a good job. Or man, I was just struggling to love my neighbor who I like. And he's like, no, the people that you don't like, the people that are actually set against you on purpose to hurt you, those are the people that you love, because this is what God does. God lets his sun shine on the just and the unjust. He lets the rain fall on his enemies and on his friends. And so it's like the end of this concept, Jesus says that you would do these things in order to be children of your Father in heaven. And he says, therefore, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And that word is telos. And so it's like, be fulfilled, be the end product of what you are in the process of becoming. And so this is the idea of bearing the image of God, being a child of God, that you would be like him. And so the fruit of this process is something of the same kind as Jesus. And so that's super fascinating.
The participation in his glory, the hope of glory.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I'm looking for something because it just came up in conversation. And if you go to the live tab on the YouTube channel, you can see a 10-minute stream I did the other day about this passage in Isaiah 58. But there's a reference here. Let's see. Okay, right here. It says, if you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. And the Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. I thought that had at least two metaphors that you referenced there in what you were talking about. And I think that it's really interesting because actually this passage came up. We'll get back to the thing. We're becoming the image of Jordan Peterson by not getting to the point. But so like this passage came up because my dad brought it up and he just wanted to read it to me because it's a really profoundly impressive passage in Isaiah where he talks about these people who are fasting so that they can prove with certainty to people around them that they are good people, and even to coerce and convince God to do what they say, and that's what he's talking about. If you actually do these things, if you break the yoke of oppression, then I will be with you, right? Because this is key. Because he is the Logos, that truthful speech that constitutes the good in the universe. When you do things that are unjust and oppressive and out of alignment with that, then there is a consequence. Every action is an equal and opposite reaction. And so it's like when you mess with reality in that way, it snaps back at you. And so there is a direct causal link to the oppression that the Israelite people are committing in order to impress God. So this weird backwards inversion of what they should be doing. And the reality is that they're not gaining God's favor by doing these things the right way. They're just simply aligning with him and allowing him to be the thing that flows eternally through them. And so when you align yourself in this way, you're not earning anything from God. That was my dad's initial observation, is like the fasting doesn't matter. And I was like, well, no, the fasting is actually extremely important, because my dad and I are coming at it from different angles, but we're coming to the same conclusion. He's saying the fasting doesn't earn you anything. So today, if you take Wednesdays or Fridays or whatever day, and you're like, I'm not eating this for this long or whatever, you don't gain anything from God in a transactional way. But if you continually show up to this practice of fasting, what you do gain is everything that's listed here in the proper fasting. You gain the ability to feed the hungry. right? And that stems from your ability to save your food so you can give it to someone else if you don't have that much. It also stems from your spiritual capacity for lack and need and want, and your ability to sort of maintain a generosity of spirit even when you're depriving yourself of basic needs. And so it's like there is a spiritual development along with that transparency, that mediation of the Logos into the world through you that occurs, but I want to say it only occurs through this relationship that you have with the Logos of like sort of striving to make this be true. Like you desire for yourself to become transparent and aligned with the Logos. And so while it's not transactional, it can be sort of practical, if that makes any sense. Let's see what Nietzsche has to say.
Let's do it.
Prior to Nietzsche, I would say, he did so many things first. It's quite remarkable. There was an idea that you first think and then you act. And people like to think that, but of course it's complete bloody rubbish because you're as impulsive as you can possibly imagine. You're always doing things before you think. And sometimes that's a really good idea. So the idea that you see things and then think and then act, it's like, yeah, really? No, I'm sorry. I don't do that. No one I know does that, and they certainly don't do that when they're emotional. You act first. And one of the things that Nietzsche said very clearly was that our ideas emerged out of the ground of our action over thousands and thousands of years. And then when philosophers were putting forward those ideas, what they were doing wasn't generating creative ideas. They were just telling the story of humanity. And it's already there. It's already in us. It's already in our patterns of behavior. And it strikes me that he was a genius, and that was one of his many, many observations of pure genius. And so you can think about it, like this too, is that there's the unknown, and then you act in the face of the unknown, and then you dream about the action. And that's what you're doing in a movie theater. And then you speak about it. And so...
All right.
I don't know why that made me think of my friend once made a joke. It was around New Year's, where just like kind of just bullshitting about New Year's resolutions. Like, no one has had real resolutions. But he's like, my resolution is to stop walking out of the movie theater feeling like I'm the main character of the movie I just watched.
That's really good. Yeah, I remember watching like Nacho Libre as a kid and then just wrestling my brother. That's like deep within us.
I watched a lot of Jason Bourne and Neo, Matrix.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Okay, so this idea of what is being acted out is then being sort of abstractly conceived of and then spoken. This is something that we've already discussed this on an episode in this series. Not that either of us remember that, but I do remember seeing this graph before, or the diagram, and it's laid out right there. And he kind of, I think they're the same thing, but the one on the right is for smart people and the one on the left is for normal people. So like Nietzsche's observation is that everything that is being written down and codified is something that has been acted out. And that's what Peterson is trying to get to. These things are so real that we know that they're wrong, even when we don't know how to say that they're wrong. Like this is during like the stories that are written down in the Torah are examples of stories that were being spoken about, but like they had to be acted out and then conceived of or dreamed of and then spoken of, right? And so as Moses is leading the people through the Reed Sea, he's doing that. He's acting, right? And then afterwards they have to be like, wow, that was crazy. What the heck what just happened? Well, this happened and this happened. And then they can speak about it. Then they can represent that condensation of the story through the text. And so Peterson's getting at the fact that we act out these things just like the rats that play act out this morality of like, we want this game to continue to happen. And so the bigger rat is going to cede 30% of the wins to the little rat so that the game continues to happen. But the little rat is also maintaining part of the structure of this by desiring to play and also by not desiring to play if he starts to lose too much, right? And so this thing is negotiated through action and through relationship, and then it's sort of conceived of. I don't know if I have a clip in here for it, but he talks about the way that Piaget, Jean Piaget, who's a child development psychologist, he identified that when you get a group of 6-year-olds to play a game, and then they all will play a game, and you'll watch them and observe that there are rules and a goal and these types of things. But you can pick one of those 6-year-olds out of the group and say, hey, what game are you playing and what are the rules? And they don't have a good answer for you. They don't have a well-conceived thing to say or to speak on what constitutes the rules of this game. And yet they can act it out together in some sort of coherent fashion that they are able to participate with. So this action, this level of participation within this moral structure is possible to them well before they can articulate to you why it is that this is in and this is out, or this is a goal or this is not a goal, etc. And so I just think that's very fascinating, especially Nietzsche's correlation to things like the 10 Commandments, right? That's really what we're talking about here.
It makes me think about, I feel like I see this play out a lot with teaching 6th grade, that they're past that Piaget thought you're describing, or rather observation you're describing, about kids can act out a game, but they can't really conceptualize the game. And then even if they can conceptualize the game, they can't articulate the rules of the game. I think I see that. The school I teach at is like a classical school. That's the pedagogical approach, where it talks about, there's like the grammar stage, the logic stage, and then I'm blanking on what the middle stage is. Logic stage, I think it's the last. No, I forget the last one. But with like associating people, like kids, with even just the concepts themselves, even just the words, whether or not they understand them, to just kind of get them to see the patterns. So it's kind of moving from a pattern-based, acted out thing, and then trying to then get to the logic stage where you can really, I think that's the imagistic thing going on here too, where they can actually mentally conceive and really start to connect the dots, and more being able to formulate connections between the terms. And then there's I think it's called the argument stage, or someone will probably have to correct me on it, but where you can actually then, you've developed the place where now you can go and make your own logical points. You understand not only the words and the patterns, but now you can go create something new by learning from what is conventional or what is constituted in real life, and then go and create new realities through spoken word. Anyways, I think that's an interesting thing about, I see that a lot in like my students. It's they can like see it in their heads. They're at the place where they can actually conceptualize it, but they just can't articulate. And it's so interesting to watch them in that phase, like where they're so frustrated and they're like looking to me to bail them out. But I'm like, nah, dude, like this is the goal. This is where it's at. You got to wrestle this out. Like, anyways, it's just making me think about how procedural ways of learning is really, or acted out ways of learning is super crucial. Embodied truths and all these type of things. So it's making me think a lot about same thing I've been thinking about this whole time. Actually, it's not really interesting enough for a podcast again, but that is an interesting, not only diagram but thought about the importance of the word, the importance of articulation, and how it's not something that really uh, it's not easy, and it's not something you can kind of just like uh, stumble upon proficiency in. It really is something that it takes discipline. It takes a lot to get to the place where you have competency in your ability to articulate and speak um, and the power of speech.
One of the things that I think when I'm looking at this diagram is it's interesting that it's a tripart uh, image, and so uh, that makes me think about like the Trinity, something like that, but also how th- that Trinitarian structure is found almost ubiquitously, which is kind of crazy. Um, it's true. There could be some sense of pareidolia here of like, because I think about the Trinity, then I see it in everything. But I, these are symbols that come from all over the place, and they correspond with a great deal of accuracy. So, one thing I wanted to say about this is that uh, it's interesting to me that it seems like the God in Genesis 1 operates in the inverse. So he speaks first. Like that, I could be wrong. It could be wrong. But it seems a little bit like that. And I think the reason that I was saying this is because he's eternal, there isn't this same developmental quality to his being, because he is, that's the whole thing. I am that I am. Now, if he speaks first, that's like starting the story in media res. This is like in the middle of the story. We're getting right into it, and then you continue this cycle because as you grow, you outgrow the language that you have. That's a necessary reality. Your language is limited, and so you act stupidly with no language, and then you begin to piece that together and dream or imagize, imagine,
Imagine, yeah.
and then you're able to speak about it. And so, like, you could see this in any 3-act story structure where the hero begins, and then he something happens, and he has to overcome the circumstances, and then he does, and at the end, you're like, whew, thank goodness he did that, and he grew so much through that process, like the Hobbit or whatever. And so that speech that you get to at the end is sort of the crystallization of these actions that you've taken and the imagining that you've done, and then you're able to sort of encode that through language. But with God, there's this sort of revelation of God, right? That's a concept of how we relate to him. And so when he speaks, it might be that there were actions and imaginations that precede the speech that you hear, but you're not party to that, right? You have no awareness of those things. And so you get the encoding of like the call or whatever. And there's this weird way in which you're almost drawn to the speech. You're almost drawn to, like, confession is a fun word. It means to say the same thing. And so there's like this conviction that you have about a call. That would be speech. Speech is what a call is, a vocation. And it draws your actions and your imaginations to this point where you're able to say the same thing as what God has said initially. And so there's this crazy, like, Christopher Nolan Tenet sort of backwards, forwards, what's happening. But it's because God exists. He is being itself, the ground of being. And so our being is in strange relationship with his being. But anyway, that was one thing. And then this other thing is that it just seemed very sexual, the diagram, because the parts relate to each other and then produce a third. And so action is the masculine, and then imagination is the feminine, and they come together, and they necessarily must relate such that speech can be formed. And that speech is the new creation of those two things coming together. And then this process continues. Then that speech grows up and becomes either an action or an imagination. And when they are deeply in love, they, etc. But yeah, so I just thought that was cool and neat that it's productive, because that indicates life and growth to me.
I don't know why
Yeah.
I was just thinking like a birds and the bee, like when an
Yeah,
action and idea each other, love each other very much, they come together. No.
that's what I was trying to say. You got it.
Oh, well, that's why I was thinking that then.
Yeah. All right. More hierarchical stuff.
You're doing what you should be doing, but you're doing it in a way that increases the probability that you'll do it better the next time you do it. And then you could say, here's another thing to think about along the same lines. And I know we haven't got to Adam and Eve yet. You tell your kids to play fair, right? You say, it's not whether or not you win, it's how you play the game. And you say that and you don't really know what you mean. You feel kind of stupid saying it even though you know it's true. And your kid looks at you like there's something wrong with you because he doesn't know what you're talking about either, but you know it's true. And so here's why it's true. Life isn't a game, it's a set of games. And the rule is, never sacrifice victory across the set of games for victory in one game. Right? And that's what it means to play properly. You want to play so that people keep inviting you to play, because that's how you win. Right? You win by being invited to play the largest possible array of games. And the way you do that is by manifesting the fact that you can play in a reciprocal manner every time you play, even if there's victory at stake. And that's what makes you successful across time. And we all know that, and we even tell our kids that, but we don't know that we know it. And so we're not adapting ourselves to the game and victory in the game. We're adapting ourselves to the meta game and victory across the set of all possible games. And that's what that's exactly what, as far as I can tell, that's exactly what this is aiming at too. That's the same idea, that there's a mode of being that transcends the particularities of the localized contest. That's the other way to think about it. And to act morally is not to win today's contest at the expense of the rest of possible contests. And again, I don't see that as something that's arbitrary. It's not relativistic. There's an absolute moral stance there, and everyone recognizes it. And I also think it's the key to success. And I would also say it's very much akin in a strange way. Like the person who is the master at being invited to play the largest possible number of games is also the same person. I haven't quite figured out the precise relationship between these two, is also the same person that goes out forthrightly to conquer the unknown before it presents itself as the enemy at the door. They're the same thing. Now, I haven't figured out why that is exactly, but well, I'll figure it out eventually. And when I do, I'll tell you. Well,
so good. Do you have thoughts? I want to give you a chance to go first here.
Yeah, I got thoughts. I always have thoughts. Okay, I'm in a weird headspace. I'll be honest with you. I don't know why I'm in such a weird headspace, but I am. So I'm really trying to reel myself in here. Well, that's one of my favorite. I quote that often with my students. Like, I think that's probably one of the most impactful things I've learned from Jordan Peterson is that, I mean, it's even in the quote in the comment section, right? Like that's just a powerful, articulation of a timeless truth, of a principle that is like, when you hear it, it resonates because we all, even what he was saying, right? Like we all know it, but to actually hear it articulated in a concise and not just concise, but in such a good way. It feels like eureka every time. But yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about. Well, as I was hearing that too, I'm just thinking about myself a lot. That's where I'm at right now. I'm in a very self-reflective mood. I've been this whole summer. I've been traveling a lot and going here and there, and so just to think about that, even in my own life, like it's weird the games I'm invited to play with whom I'm invited to play them with, like all different flavors, and um, I feel like it's because I listened to Jordan Peterson at such a crucial point, and because of that thing we brought up earlier about really grappling pretty early on in my life a lot of the ignoble things and the hard maladapted um, modes of conduct that I had, and then actually bringing them to the light of Christ and having them be transformed into, I mean, properly adapted and redeemed, regenerated, revamped modes of being and operation. Um, and so I feel like that's just after such long trips like these, or even seasons like these, I kind of like. I just got home a couple of days ago, and even since then, I did more stuff yesterday. That's why I'm sunburnt. I went to like this. You know what? I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm not even gonna talk about it. What I'm trying to say is, uh, after like having so much activity, it's like I think it's that like operating in procedures and not really like it takes effort to like after doing the thing then to process it, like to really process it, conceptualize it, and then now even as I'm doing trying to articulate like what's even worth talking about here about all that I've experienced. um like that's why my brain is where it's at. There's like a lot of overload, um but I do see this truth as a embraced truth that I really learned from Jordan Peterson that has truly revolutionized my life and led me to be able to walk in truth and walk in a way that is, uh, well, that is just wise, where I'm able to actually have victory in many different domains because I'm not being short sighted and sacrificing that whole thing, sacrificing victory in a huge array of games for the sake of victory. Like right now, it's like to be able to see the bigger picture. And um, I think that's it's really good to hear this again and think about this. If I could be a force or a influential figure that leads other people to be able to recognize and then embody this same principle, I think it can have a crazy chain reaction, you know, but that comes through only honest speech and me actually participating in the procedure of honest confrontation and not falling prey to the temptation to be politely deceptive with myself and with others, but to be honestly truthful and knowing when to be confrontational, knowing when to be, uh, I guess, pity, to have like healthy pity with myself and with others as well. Um, those are my wandering thoughts in light of all this.
I think that to sacrifice victory across the set of games for victory in one game is uh, a mistake that comes from a feeling that you might sort of lose it, right? And there's an interesting thing about games because they do have winners and losers, and so you think that you don't want to be a loser, but if you sacrifice, say, the game of honesty or fairness for victory in another game, and you utilize deceit, or, cheating, something like this, in order to win at a different game, then you're losing at this other sort of meta game, and you're sort of trying to ignore the fact that you're even playing that game. Like, no, I'm not really competing in that game. It doesn't really bother me because I can get so much more stuff that I can quantify and that I care about for whatever reason in this other game that I'm playing. And so that's where you get deceived, is that one game is more important or will be more beneficial to you than another. And I think that it's probably true that certain games, like you get to a point in life where you have to decide not to play certain games, right? Like you mature to the point where you can choose many different games to play, but not all of the games will yield benefits that you want. And so there's this discernment between the games that you have to apply. And I think that what happens is the game of ethics or morality or this transparency to the logos that we've been talking about, that game is less material, it's less obvious, it's less visual in its representation. So I'm a winner at the game of, being meek, or I'm a winner at the game of I'm trying to think of Beatitudes. Totally blanking on Beatitudes.
Poor.
Being poor in spirit, or being a peacemaker. These things have non-obvious benefits. That's in fact the whole thing with the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is like, hey, I'm going to tell you what the result of winning that game is going to be. And people are like, really? Like a peacemaker? The guy that gets his nose broken, stepping in between two people, that guy wins? What does he win? Both people are mad at him. What does he actually win? And yet the value that you can bring to yourself and to others by upholding some sort of standard of peace, and even just what you were talking about, like knowing when to have conflict in order to resolve the conflict, versus other times when you want to have this conflict and play it out because you sort of want to beat the other person. Peterson talks about this in other talks about like how winning an argument with your wife is stupid. like not as a rule, but like in general, you don't want to just like beat her over the head with facts and logic. Like, I gotcha, you were wrong this time, because you're losing the metagame of your marriage. You're losing a community within which both parties can negotiate and grow together in their ability to participate together in vulnerability. And so these things are not obvious. That's all I'm really trying to say, is that we sacrifice the things that you can't see, the unseen values, for things that are very seen. Like even in the case of, winning a particular game, it's typically a game that you think will get you to the next game and will get you to the next game. But the reality is, no one wants to play with somebody who is cheating at these other games, or ignoring these other more spiritual or invisible games. But they're all tied together. That's I think the genius of this quote, is to say, like, it's like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. That sort of idea, but represented in sort of a value structure, like why it is that you want to do the right thing, even if it means you lose right now in the immediate. Like you have the context in whatever situation it is. I will lose this job if I say the truth, or I will go to jail if I say the truth, these types of things. But maintaining the priority of these other games that maybe generalize better, or what I mean? Like, it's when we get hung up on the particulars of certain things that we think we can control it. Like, I don't want to get fired from this job because I don't know what my next job will be. And so you can't conceive of that. But then you sacrifice your understanding of like what is true for some form of deception, and you lose so much
Your
more than you
soul.
accounted for. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing of it is, it's like, on one side of the coin, it's not obvious what we're talking about, but at the same time, it's like we all have that guttural, like when there is like just a bad game being played, like we all feel it. You feel it in your gut, like this is a bad experience, or I don't like this game. Um, but it's hard to articulate why. I think that's the thing. It's like it's not obvious as to why that phenomenon occurs. But I think we all have that, unless your conscience is seared because you're so well seasoned in, just being a bully, or I guess just being a bully, really. But when I see it a lot, it's really fascinating. Like, even it's a hard thing to play from my I don't want to derail the whole conversation, but um I think of, like, with my students, when there is unfairness in the faculty towards them, when someone is handling power and authority in a way that is just not right, and they know it and they're outraged by it. um but then there's like thankfully I had the privilege of having students that trusted me, and so I would give them the space to articulate themselves, no matter how dangerous that was. um to be honest, and it is dangerous. It is, especially because they don't understand social conventions. And so, but there's like a sense of, like, when that conversation is taking place, like, this is really dangerous. This is a very dangerous conversation, because we're transgressing the social convention of polite deception, which is important at times. For the record, it's the polite deception thing isn't like a always bad. It's like a necessary evil for the sake of, just, I think it even lays in here. It's like some games you have to lose for the sake of winning the ultimate game. And so, um, I think that's kind of the point of this quote too. And sometimes me fleshing out my honest impressions will cause me to lose the ultimate game, and me just, like, just not being transparent in this moment about my honest impressions. I need to lose in that game for the sake of winning ultimately. And so, anyways, but to see that in the children, like, when they feel in their gut, they know this is a bad game. It's not fair. Something's going on here. And to try to help them learn how to articulate these things and make sense of it, um, really it's a really tricky thing. Um, but to experience that, I think that's something that um, I experienced that a handful of times this last school year, and I feel like it left a lot of impressions that I haven't fully processed. Mostly because to talk about it out loud, well, now even on a podcast, right? It's like there needs to be a sense of, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, what word am I looking for? Like, with a client, like if there's someone who's like a psychologist, like, you don't
Confidentiality.
confidentiality. There is a level of confidentiality in these areas too. It's like, when you have those honest conversations, like, there's a need for confidentiality for some reason, because it is, like, sacred. It's like not just anybody can see this or be a part of this, or ought to, really. It's like you have to be in the right place at the right time and the right condition to um, see this. And if you're not, then that's not for you to see. I don't know what I'm getting at. There's something here that my mind is now starting to reel, because as we're talking about honest communication and the use of words, it's like there is we talk about, like, holiness of speech, like, we're talking about varying levels of sacredness, of, and maybe just speech that's consecrated unto a purpose that, many are called but few are chosen, type of thing. um I don't know. As I'm thinking about this, it's like to not be as, it's causing me to, there is an exclusive aspect of expression, of communication, of honesty, that is the game, right? Like that is the penultimate game, to participate in that game and to be able to actually, and I'm thinking of that procedure, and then the dream or the imagistic, and then the articulation. Like I feel like I'm right there, like at that. Like I'm starting to kind of imagine. I can see it in my imagination, but to actually articulate, like it's because I've been called to participate in this process, this procedure. Um, it really only comes through initiation.
Mm.
Uh, Initiated. That's what mystery is, right? That's what the occult means. It's like hidden from those, unless you've gone through this procedure, this rite of passage, that then opens you up to the ability of like seeing things in action. And then when you sit there and spend time there, or that's what discipleship I think is, right? Like as I am able to participate in this procedure more and more and more, and the more I'm able to actually conceptualize it, and then the more and more I'm able to conceptualize it and also participate in it, then I'm actually able to articulate it. I think that's what you're talking about, the Ten Commandments thing too, that Peterson's anthropological way of thinking of how the Ten Commandments came about, which I think many Christians would like, like be it. There's a part of me too of that, like that religious, like I don't want to think about Ten Commandments on an anthropological level. It was divine revelation at that moment, which I do believe that. But at the same time, that's where like the scholasticism and then the mysticism parts of me clash, and uh, I think both can be true. But then there's cognitive dissonance there. I'm getting lost. I'm getting really lost in a lot of these things.
Well,
But all this to say, with the whole, I think that's what he's getting at, right? With the Ten Commandments, how that's like a mountaintop experience thing, and that only comes through a process of not only initiation, but then also, I want another Asian word, but I can't think of it. Uh, Sensitization, habituation, and then there's like the recapitulation. How about that?
mm,
How about that? Did you like that? I did.
yeah.
All right, I'm done now.
Okay. I think that the anthropological model scares people, and there's lots of deep reasons why. I've had a couple conversations this week about uh, you know, the total depravity of man. And so if we're totally depraved, then anything anthropological is just sinful and rotten and,
Yeah, and it can lead to like humanism, the thought that,
absolutely.
yeah.
And uh and yet the central figure of the universe revealed himself as a human, right? And so this is sort of interesting because then we come up with all of these important words to say, well, he's not really a human, But it's like,
Yeah.
no, he definitely was. That's the point. And so I deeply appreciate this on a theological level from Peterson, bringing the anthropological angle to it, because I think this is like, I don't know. It's obviously, it's not his idea, the anthropological model, but like, it's obviously newer than whatever, early first century Christian teachings would have said about Jesus and what he was doing. It's
Maybe.
it's definitely
Maybe
newer
it's just
than.
the ones that actually had that were just,
Could be, yes.
yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like it's definitely newer than the Jewish rabbinical teachings on what was happening, and what they would have understood the oral tradition becoming written, and that whole process to be. I'm unfamiliar with if there's documentation of this in any way, but like, I'm sure that there was a conception of, like, we have these great stories, we should probably write them down, and like there was a process. People went through that process to get these stories to be written down. But like Moses on the mountain having this revelation, I don't think that it's necessarily not divine if what Peterson is saying is true was happening. Like in my own life, I can see me going through it, looking back at the last month, the last 6 years, the last 10 years, whatever. Like I have these different frames of reference for my own life and the experiences that I have. And I have acted through those things. And then I've been able to imagine sort of like the significance of them and to begin to grasp what it is that I want to articulate about them. But that process doesn't remove God from the picture. Like I believe in God and I can now see like his involvement at different points throughout my life and where I'm acting and he prompted it or where I'm acting in rebellion against him, these types of things. So it's like his role as a character in the story is not removed in any way by identifying a pattern of this process of developing to the point where I am able to articulate something in the way that Moses would be developing his articulation of the Ten Commandments.
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that I do vaguely remember was he talks about in this lecture, I'm not sure if you're going to play it or not, but how he talks about as if like Moses has been judging and then the Jethro instance happens. His father-in-law comes and tells him he should have judges rather than you doing it all. He talks about as if that happened leading up to the receiving of the Ten Commandments, but in the way that Exodus talks about is that they go straight to Sinai and then get the Ten Commandments, and then there's the desert thing, and then that Jethro thing happens. At least the way I think, if I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that's chronologically in terms of the way how the narrative is for like expressed in Exodus. Ten Commandments doesn't come after a lot of trial and error. Anyways, that kind of throws a monkey wrench in the anthropological.
It doesn't, because you're wrong.
Am I?
Jethro meets with Moses in Exodus 18, and then it's immediately before they move to Mount Sinai, the giving of the Ten Commandments in 19 and 20.
So that it doesn't throw a monkey wrench.
It throws the opposite of a monkey wrench.
Dog bone?
Yeah, sure. Okay, we're gonna go there right now.
Yeah. If we get to Exodus. So, well, look, where does it happen? Well, on a mountain. Well, that's a pyramid. That's up, right? That's up. It's up. So strip the religious preconceptions off what you observe and just look at what you see. Well, look, there's primate looking upward at dominant figure. That's what you see there. Now, it's very interestingly symbolically represented because you have God the Father there with the cross. And I think what that means, as far as I can tell, is that there's a recognition there in the image that the person who's most dominant is the one has the most authority, is the one who's voluntarily accepted the suffering that's part of being. And that's what that picture represents. It's like the authority holds that and says, this is what you have to accept. And that transfixes the viewer because of the fact that it's true. And you think, well, is that true? Okay, well, think about it this way. Do you like brave people or do you like cowards? Well, that's pretty straightforward. And what's the ultimate act of bravery? It's to come to terms with the fact that you're mortal and limited and to live forthrightly regardless. Well, obviously, that's at the core of what's admirable. And why would we presume that that's not the case? We act as if that's the case. It's what everyone dreams and wishes that they could do. I mean, assuming that, you've dispensed with the idea that you're going to be immortal. I suppose that might be worth wishing for too, or perhaps not. Immortal is a very long time. But you certainly want this. And that image says, well, this is what you should be. And we've got that same opening into the sky going on in that image that I showed you before. It's like this is a transcendent truth that constantly remanifests itself across time and space. And Jung would say it's built into your psyche, that image. Now, there are elements of it that are culturally constructed. It wouldn't necessarily have to be the cross, although the cross is a very old symbol. It's far older than its use in Christianity, and it's been used in many, many religious representations. But that echoes, the soul echoes with that. And then there's Moses up there on the mount receiving the law. And so we'll talk a lot more about that when we get to Exodus. But if we get to Exodus. So, well, look, where does it happen? Well, on a mountain. Well, that's a pyramid. That's up, right? That's up. It's up. It's up in the stratosphere. It's up in the sky where you look upward. Okay, and then so what's happening to Moses? Well, here's a bit of a clue, as far as I can tell. I figured this out partly again by reading Jean Piaget, because one of the things that Piaget said about kids was that they first learn to play a game, but they don't know what the rules are. Meaning that if you have a bunch of kids together, they can play a game. But if you take one of the kids out of the game when they're young, say 6, and you say what are the rules, they can only sort of give you a representation. So you take 6-year-old 1 and he'll tell you some of the rules, and 6-year-old 2 will tell you different rules, and 6-year-old 3 will tell you different rules. But if you put them all together, they can play. So they have the knowledge embodied either individually or in the group. The knowledge is there to be extracted. Well, then they get a little older, they can extract the rules. And then they start to play by the rules. And then Piaget's last step was, well, it isn't just that kids play by the rules, it's that they learn that they can make the rules. And he thought about that as moral progression. First you can play, then you can play by the rules. Then you learn, maybe, because he didn't think everyone learned this, that you're actually the master of the rules. That doesn't mean the rules are arbitrary, but it means that you can be the generator of the rules, assuming that you know how to play the game. And he thought about that as a moral progression. And then I thought, well, that's exactly what happened to Moses in the story of Exodus, because Moses is out there leading all those Israelites around, and like, they don't have a law, they don't have a lawgiver, they have a tradition. They're all like crabby because, well, they're in a desert. It's like they were in a tyranny, but now they're in a desert. It's like, that's no improvement. So they're really getting pretty bitchy about it. And so they're worshiping false idols and having one catastrophe after another. And they get Moses to judge their conflicts. And so he does that for God only knows how long. Forever. Crabby Israelites come to Moses and bitch at him. It's like, well, he did this and she did that. And so then he has to figure out how to make peace. And he does that so long that one of his, I think it's his father-in-law, tells him he has to stop doing it because he's going to exhaust himself. Well, then you think, well, what's happening? Well, and I'm not assuming that this is like a literal historical story. I think, again, it's a condensation. Well, any group has a set of customs, just like a wolf pack does. And so then the customs are being manifest, and someone who's a genius is watching and thinking, okay, well, what's the rule in this situation? What's the rule in this situation? What's the rule in this situation? And then in his imagination, the rules turn into a hierarchy, and then he goes up on the mountain and he goes bang, and he thinks, oh my God, here's the rules that we've been living by all this time. And that's the revelation of the commandments. Well, and you think, well, how else could it be? You think the rules came first and obeying them came second? It's like, no, the rules come first. Sorry, the actions come first. The obeying them comes first. And then you figure out what everybody's up to, and you say, hey, look, this is what you've been up to all along. And everybody goes, oh, yeah, that seems to make sense. And if it didn't, who would follow them? No one would follow them if they don't match what's already there. You just think about that as unjust. And so that's portrayed here as a cataclysmic human event. It's like, oh my God, we've been chimpanzees. We've been in this hierarchy of authority for so long. We have no idea what we're doing. And all of a sudden, poof, it burst into revelatory consciousness. And we could say, here is the law. And you say, well, is it given by God? Well, hey, it depends on what you mean by God. We could start with that presupposition, but it's not like it just came out of nowhere. It took and this is something else Nietzsche observed so interestingly. And he said, that a moral revelation was the consequence of a tremendously long process of initial construction and then formulation. Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of custom, of building custom, before you get the revelation of the articulated law. And that's a description of the pattern that works. And let's say, well, what's the pattern that works? It's the game that you can play with everybody else day after day with no degeneration.
Okay, I want to jump in here, and then we'll just start in a second from this equilibrated state
Okay,
idea,
good.
sort of as
Because
an
I was
end
like, I forgot about that.
cap. Okay, so we did some treatment of this anthropological model that he lays out there. Um, and he said, like, did it come from God? Well, it depends on what you mean by God. It's like he's playing a game that Christians can't even conceive of. It's called talking to other people. And so there, so there's like this issue where uh, Christians are thinking in their game, and he's not playing it. So, but they hear him to be playing their game, and so
Mhm.
when he's talking about this, and he doesn't say that God told Moses like what the Bible says, it's like very concerning, very concerning. But what I'm seeing here is, and what I've seen before in a way that made me consider following Jesus, like living my life, trying to learn how to live my life from Jesus. I'm seeing that this original and sort of separate, like other than every other kind of being, that original being that is, that truthful speech that constitutes the good in the universe, that thing is transparent through the story of Moses accruing these experiences and imagining them as a hierarchy and snapping it all together in that moment of divine revelation. And so it's from the bottom up that that pattern is represented through Moses's actions. Because he's saying, well, how do I get this person not to feel that my judgment is unjust, right? How can I judge this in such a way that it's dealt with fairly for both parties, that it's less likely to happen again in the future? These types of factors that come into adjudicating a situation, they're all weighing on Moses all the time. And that is his relationship with the Logos that is from the beginning. And he's embodying it by rightly aligning with it. And so when he's successful, he continues, that becomes a rule, right? So if he judges a situation and it goes sideways and they come back to him and, hey, it just happened again. Excuse me. It just happened again. Then he knows, oh, I need to adjust. I made that judgment too quickly. I didn't sleep well that day. And so I need to bring a fuller version of myself to this problem and solve it. And so that process is a further alignment with the pattern of the structure of reality. That's what we're talking about. And so when God says to Moses, these are the 10 commandments, it's not coming out of nowhere. It's coming through Moses in this bottom up and top down merging of two things in this people that God is relating with. And so that to me is an incredible story that is suffused with the presence of the God who is in the beginning creating the world. And so when Peterson says that takes thousands and thousands and thousands of years, I say, yeah, like, I don't know. Like, according to that model, yes, it does. But according to somebody else's model with the years, it doesn't. And I don't think that you need to put the weight that people do on how many years it's been for this process to occur, when the reality is that from the bottom up and the top down, there is a unification that's taking place, and people are at the center of it, right? That's what I'm seeing here. And maybe that's more symbolic and abstract in a different way, but I'm seeing such significance here, and I have no desire to bicker about how long the process was.
I think as I'm analyzing the uncomfortability I am feeling in entertaining these ideas, um, I think the reason why, to the religious mind, which I possess and also combat a lot, um, and sympathize with a lot, because I'm surrounded by a lot of, well, I was nurtured by and also surrounded by, and so therefore I play well. Uh, it says this is a different thought, but it says in Romans 12, uh, to honor what is right in the sight of all men. That word "right" in the Greek is kalos, which means like handsome or meet or uh, beautiful, and also it does obviously have moral implications as well. But when you just translate it right, it makes you think of like just merely moral. But it's even like what is beautiful, what is becoming, what is fitting, what is viewed as appropriate in the sight of all men. And so,
I
anyways.
would propose justice here. What is just is also that.
Yeah, that justice isn't just like, jurisprudence. Yeah, yes. But nonetheless, so I try to honor what's right in the sight of. It's kind of rude, it's pretty rude to be like very dismissive to my parents. I guess that's pretty much, it's like the honor your father and mother type thing, It's like, I'm not just gonna diss my parents, like I have their mind in me too, and so, and there's a lot of it that I kiss, but I also push away sometimes, and I can do that. Like there's times where it's like, yes, I'm embracing this way of thinking right now because now's the time to embrace it. And then in this type of conversation, it was like I'm gonna embrace or push away and begin to embrace something else that is. It's the whole becoming all things to all men. I think it's like as long as it's up to you, be at peace with all men. And, I think a lot of the times these conversations, people lose all the rest of the games because they want to win this game. This is a prime example of where this takes place in our culture of Christian culture. But nonetheless, all this to say, as I'm analyzing, I think for some reason, in the conception, it's like the whole reason why the times are so important is because if it was like more time, it almost as if it diminishes the miracle of, morality being stumbled upon, or actually articulated and then embraced and embodied. Or anyways, it's just like as if if there's less time, then it makes it more of a miracle. Therefore, it's more of like a powerful thing. And if you say it's more time, then it's like, well, that's diminishing the divinity of God or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't think that you need to do that. I don't think you need to believe that. But nonetheless, I think it comes from the whole taking this for granted on all sides of the argument. What's at the heart of the misunderstanding is taking for granted the fact that divine revelation, or that this revelation, whether you see it as divine or not, it's a unfathomable and it's just a mysterious revelation. I mean, it's insane that this is in the consciousness of the culture. Whether when you look at it from, that's why I do like the anthropological ways of looking at things, but at the same time, I understand the dangers, I understand the threat, and but I'm just not a coward, I guess. Which that sounds really prideful, but you know what? I'm willing to just go on a limb and say that.
No, you're absolutely right. Remember when he said, who do you like more, somebody that's cowardly or somebody that's brave? He's talking about this archetype of the hero that goes outside of what is known into the unknown and confronts what's in the unknown before it can come and attack the known structure. And that's the reality. If you believe that you're right and you limit yourself to the certainty that you already have, you cease to go through the process of acting and imagining and developing new speech. Then what you're not doing is confronting the thing that will inevitably corrupt and kill your certainty. And so that's just like that's a fundamental aspect of reality. If you stop growing, then you stop you stop growing, you stop living. And so
you start dying.
You start dying. And
Yeah.
you become weaker. This is what it is. You become weaker and you subject yourself to vulnerabilities to attack, right? And so the reality that there are things that are going to attack you is what you need to be aware of. And in the weirdest way, it is our overabundance of awareness of the threats and our fears, our anxieties that lead us to be so gleefully clinging to our certainty. Like, yes, we did it. We figured it out. And it's the very thing that takes you out, right? Whenever you think you've got it, you will learn your lesson because you will not be aware of your surroundings. You will not be aware of the threats that will come that are new and are different, right? You may have solved your problems, but there will be new and different problems in the future. I was going to say that what you were saying was reminding me of the way that like we think that these things are at odds, the time frame and the divine nature of the revelation are somehow at odds, right? I think that is the thing that reveals God to me in the most robust way possible, right? Because that's not subject to my feeling. Like that's one of the reasons that I appreciate his biological insistence when he makes these arguments, because he's saying you're alive or you're dead, right? We understand the binary there. We understand like this is what Moses says in Deuteronomy, like if you do the good things, then you'll have life. And if you do the bad things, then you'll have death, you know? This is a very simple concept. And so when he's appealing to this, he's appealing to the most fundamental aspects of your being, right? Because you are human. Like we're not just some spiritual thing that gets to relate to this logos structure of the universe. We are embodied. And so that's what I'm saying is so miraculous about this and so robust is that through my development from being in the womb to here, like when David says, you knit me together in my mother's womb, I was fearfully and wonderfully made. That's very poetic language, but like he's recognizing the moments. He's recognizing the moments where a body was formed, right? Through biological processes. And you can say, that's a miracle. It's beyond human science, you know, and be very Christian fundamentalist about it. But like to insist that any type of contradiction of that poetic language, like by learning facts about how beings are created or, you know, like bodies are created and the people that inhabit them, consciousness is a very difficult problem for science. But just to insist that there's an enmity there is false. I think that we need to make more distinctions in the way of like Christian apologetics is not stupid. You know, that's like one of my it's like a great secondhand embarrassment, you know. We talked a while ago on the show about the debate between Dr. Healthy Gamer and Greg Kokel, and one other guy. I feel like it's
Islamic,
just the
right?
host, Stephen. No, it was just Stephen, the Diary of the CEO guy, and
That's
Stephen
right.
Bartlett. Yeah. So those three guys are talking, and Bartlett is in between. He's like, I don't really believe anything, you know. I'm just like a cool atheist dude who makes a lot of money, and so what, you know, I'm just curious about it, but I don't know. And then Kokel's like, well, you should know that the Bible is true. And then, there was one other person. What?
I
Oh,
thought
Alex
so.
O'Connor. It was O'Connor. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so O'Connor's on the other side saying, well, yeah, you should know that the Bible is actually factually incorrect. You know, it's contradictory and all. You know, so the atheist and the Christian are arguing on the same plane of just being at odds with each other. And that's their whole thing, is that the other person is wrong. And this is what I'm trying to get at. Like the fact that you can even conceive of someone being right or wrong, and this is like kind of a typical Christian argument, but the fact that you can even conceive of that must come from some relationship with the logos that structures the universe, or else you can't even begin to present that. And so to say this atheist person is dumb and wrong could be true. There's plenty of dumb and wrong people, and that's fine. But it can be equally true of the Christian who's making his points. And then the Hindu guy who's saying all these random sort of Eastern, they're not random, these Eastern practices that we're all unfamiliar with in the West, he comes in and he says, well, hey, actually, the way your brain works is like this. And so when the Vedanta says to do this, or, you know, Vishnu did this in the story, What he's really saying is like, you should wake up and get sunlight in your eyes. And that's just a stupid example, but like, you should do things that are good for you, right? So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you have better results in your life. And that's it. That's it. It doesn't ruin anyone's points of view, except for the ones that they're certain about, and they clamp down on, and they limit the ability of people to hold that belief and confront the unknown.
Well, not only that, but then they even divorce, because that's what I was even thinking as I was talking about the whole, like, when we're looking at the law, for example, and whether it's anthropologically or whatever, these two perspectives on it. It's like when you get so lost in whatever perspective and just aren't actually getting lost in the revelation itself, that's when like you're divorcing the actual point from your lived experience. And now
Yes.
you're creating experiences that are just like they don't they don't matter. Like they don't
Yes.
matter. Uh
Yeah, it's the Christian meaning crisis. This is something that I can't remember where I came across it. We'll talk about that more later. But there's an idea where like meaning is removed because relationality is removed. Like you don't matter. God's doing it. That sort of thing comes into play. And I believe that what we're suffering from there is a sort of like uh either God is doing it or man is doing it. But the story has always been that God created man to do it with him. And
mm,
so God is the first mover, and that's fine. That's a great that I love that. Fantastic. Obviously, I didn't do any of this, like I didn't even build the technology that we're using to have this conversation, right? Like that's something other people built, but I didn't. And so I'm perfectly capable of accepting that. Now, what do I do? This is the thing that I struggle with in a certain conception of like God is doing everything, and we're sort of like being puppeteered by him or by the devil or whatever. I don't know. And the reality is this story of whether or not it's anthropological or divine, it's like it's is it God or is it humanity that came up with the Ten Commandments? No, that is a story of the enemy of God, right? That's a story of humanity being at odds with God. And that's not the story. That's the whole point. That like the incarnation is the expression of the true story, which is that humanity and God are in this together. And there's lots of details to go into there, and they're fun to think about and to experience and all of these things. That's what your life is an experience
mhm.
of that very fact. And so to deny the value of your life and its meaning in this process of relating to the divine, that is foundationally corrosive, right? Like you're destroying the very thing that will indicate to you what has meaning, how the hierarchy is formed, and what game is more important to play.
Mhm. Yeah, wow. Amen.
And that is why Jordan Peterson convinced me to be a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Piaget's theory on equilibrium or something like that.
Day after day with no degeneration. And that's another thing Piaget figured out that's so brilliant, and that's his idea of the equilibrated state. It's an extension of Immanuel Kant's idea about the universal maxim, right? Act in a way so that each action could become a universal rule. That was Kant's fundamental moral maxim, and Piaget put a twist on that. He said, no, that's not exactly it. It's act in such a way that it works for you now and next week and next month and next year and 10 years from now. And so that while it's working for you, it's also working for the people around you and for the broader society. And that's the equilibrated state. And you could think about that as an intimation of the kingdom of the city of God on earth. It's something like that. And it's based on this idea that a morality has to be iterable. And there's been lots of simulations online already, artificial intelligence simulations of trading games, right? I mean, the people who've been studying the emergence of moral behavior, say in artificial intelligence systems, have already cottoned on to the idea that one of the crucial elements to the analysis of morality is iterability. You can't play a degenerating game because it degenerates. Like, obviously, you want something that at least remains stable across time. And God, if you could really get your act together, maybe it would slowly get better. And of course, that's what you'd hope for your family, right? That's what you're always trying to do, unless you're completely hell-bent on revenge and destruction. It's like, is there a way that we can continue to play together that will make playing together even better the next day? That's what you're up to. And, well, I don't see anything arbitrary about that. And part of it, and this is also why I think that bloody postmodernists are so incorrect, because, you know, they say something like, there's an infinite number of interpretations of the world. And that's actually true. But then they make a mistake and they say, well, no interpretation is to be privileged over any other interpretation. It's like, wrong. That's where things go seriously off the rails, because the interpretation has to be, and this is the Piagetian objection, is like, if you and I are going to play a game, rule one is we both have to want to play. Rule two is other people are going to let us play. Rule three is we should be able to play it across a pretty long period of time without it degenerating. And maybe rule four is, while we're playing, the world shouldn't kill us. It's like, there are not very many games, like you don't send your kids out to play on the superhighway, right? So they're not playing hockey on the superhighway because the world kills them. And so there's an infinite number of interpretations, but there is not an infinite number of solutions. And the solutions are constrained by the fact of the world and our suffering in the world, and then also constrained by the fact that we constrain each other. And so that's where I think that's gone like dreadfully wrong. So
That was incredible. I find it interesting about the fourth thing he said there was about the rules for the games. You know, I don't think I can articulate all four, but the fourth one was that, and we do it in a way where the world doesn't kill us. Like, I kind of get that's like the garden. That's the garden motif. It seems like, you know, to create a space where you keep what's outside that's gonna actually kill and destroy what's here, and then you also dictate how we're gonna operate within this garden.
So this brings up a topic that I think I may have discussed with you before, but for me, I've always viewed the survival instinct of myself before I was aware of Jesus, who in this conversation we've been illuminating his connection or his characterization in the scriptures as the true speech that constitutes the good in the universe. So like before I was aware that I had a relationship to that good in the universe, and that he was particularized, all of that. But before I was consciously interacting in a way that was trying to be aligned with that good in the universe, I had survival instincts that were based on these lesser games, right? Because that's sort of like the ultimate structural hierarchy shape thing. But I was operating according to immediate gratification, pleasure, avoidance of pain, and they're just very simple survival instincts, right? And so if I was afraid of something, I wouldn't do it. And if I was excited about something, I would do it. That is a horrible way to orient yourself if you're unmoored from this logos pattern of the universe. So what transformed in me across time as I came into relationship with Jesus, the logos, is that my survival instinct adhered more closely to the largest, most universal version of the game, right? And so that game became more important to me. Not lying, right? That's extremely important to me. And a commitment to, well, like the 10 Commandments, let's say. And so just to give us an image, those things became important to me. I remember a moment, we were in a mission trip group together, and we were in a hotel, and I needed a washcloth. And we would stay at hotels, and then we would stay at like people's houses and different things. So it just would have been nice for me to have a washcloth. And like I could have Amazoned one, but it would have taken a little bit of logistics to figure out like where we were going to be and when it would have arrived, that sort of thing. And so I was like, I should just steal a washcloth from this hotel, you know? And then I was like, what are you doing? Like, you can't steal this washcloth from this hotel. And I never would have had that thought before. I just would have taken it, you know? And so that moment was like, it's in my head. I'm saying it now, 6 years later, like, because I remember being like, whoa, that's so weird. Like, why didn't I just take it? Like this, this is captured in Psalm, the longest Psalm 119, where David is talking about like the law of God and just how he loves it and how he repeatedly interacts with it and he meditates on it and he engages his life with this law. And it's like that never would have made sense to me prior to encountering this as a real, lived, acted out procedural experience. This is why I'm so phenomenological in my approach to theology. Like, you have to live it out. You cannot participate with this structure in an abstract way. Okay. And so what we're getting at here with the equilibrated state and the fourth point about the games, that you part of a game that you can play that isn't degenerative is that you survive the environment, right? So you can't play a game in an environment where you're going to get run over by a truck or whatever. Like, you can play hockey on the highway. So Christians always get killed, right? People that stand for what the logos structure says, they always get killed because they're refusing to play the game of the people who have this tendency towards power as authority, right? So these powerful people, they killed Socrates and they killed Jesus, right? And they killed many, many more martyrs. They're killing martyrs today. And the reality is that that aspect of a iterative game is not, it doesn't take precedence. Okay, so this is what I'm saying. The game that the totalitarian state of China is making the Christians play is not iterative, and they're not playing it, right? And so they go underground and they try to avoid at all costs the death that is coming their way if they practice their faith. However, they don't stop practicing their faith. They acknowledge the higher and more prioritized game of relationship with the ultimate pattern of the universe. And so that takes precedence over the sacrifice of their lives in the context of this authoritarian power structure. And this is the same thing that they see Jesus doing, and that's the way that they get there. But like, to sacrifice the relationship, the victory that you can gain in the ultimate game for the victory in the totalitarian authoritarian game is to sacrifice the future. So that's the thing, is they're saying, of these two games, I'm going to play the one that gives society a chance to have iterative games to play, right? I'm refusing to play this degenerative game that will only result in death and corruption of humanity, right? And so there is language in the religious tradition around like an afterlife and your immortal soul and these types of things that also, like, support their actions to stand up to somebody that can only kill your body. You should be afraid of somebody that can kill your soul. That's what Hebrews says. And so they're aware of that. But I want to say that, like, just on a fundamental level, they're acknowledging the two games and they say, I'm willing to die. I'm willing to play this game that is truly more iterative in an environment that I will die in, because the value is too great. Like, if I sacrifice the higher game for the lower game, the loss will be too great. So the loss of your life is appropriately or something discerned as more valuable. It's more valuable to lose your life than to gain it. Boom. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I think even in that too, it's like the willingness to be a living representation of how degenerate the game is. Where it's like, I'm going to be, well, a witness to the fact that this game that my people are playing, and now I've been converted to a different kingdom, now ambassador to my people, I'm going to be the embodied living witness and representation of the fact that this game is not uh, sustainable or whatever. Even Jesus did that, right? Like, this whole entire life was like to show his people just how degenerate and corrupted the power structure in the game they're playing was. Like, I mean, yes, throughout his ministry, there's times where he would go and hide. He would flee Jerusalem and then spend time because his time had not come. Like that's a refrain all throughout the book of John. But then the time does come where it's like, all right, this is a time where unless a grain of wheat falls in the ground and dies, it cannot grow. And so it's like, my time has come. What should I say? Father, deliver me from this time, for this is the time that he sent me. And so now I say, no, Father, glorify yourself. And so, anyways, like, to be that, obviously the whole China example is a modern day parallel to the type of corruption that Jesus was facing. But I think that we're even called to do that on even the most minuscule of levels, where it's like to be a living representation and just like a what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just like to be stuck in the craw of the world or whatever the culture you're in, where it's like, like I think of that example, like that random prophet in the book of Kings, where like he's like one of the last ones. Jezebel killed a bunch of people, but now like I think it's King Ahab, and the king of Judah are about to go into war. And the king of Judah is still kind of good. He's like, he still has some fear of God. So he's like, is there any prophets of Yahweh? Like, I know all your prophets are like doing their thing, but do you have any prophets of the living God? He's like, yeah, we got this one, but he never says what I want to hear. It's like, and like this guy like has a reputation. Like, he's a character too. That's one of my favorite episodes where it's like he comes out, he's like, yeah, you're going to win. And then King Ahab's like, don't lie to me, dude. He's like, all right, fine. Yeah, you're going to freaking die. Like, horribly. He's like, see, this is why I don't like this guy. Like, he just but anyways, to be that, like, that's even there, like, I don't know, just whatever the culture is, like, if you're actually living out truth, it's like you're to be a living representation of the fact that, like, when people look at your life and they're operating and playing a game that's not sustainable and is degenerative, that you are to be like a touchstone of, like, every time they see or interact with you, it's like it's the reminder of, like, I'm playing a game that's not sustainable. And then also, meanwhile, to be living your life playing the game that is sustainable. Yeah, that equilibrated. To be equilibrated. It's interesting.
Yeah, Piaget, I haven't invested time in reading his stuff, but across the course of Peterson conversations around him, he does do some classes in, I think, the Maps of Meaning, and it's in the book Maps of Meaning. I've encountered the Peterson parts, what he's excerpted from Piaget, and it's profoundly. What's profound about it is that it is so deeply encoded. Like, that's one of the things you can see in children is like a lack of guile. They're not, like psychology and social sciences are, they're not provable. They're not real sciences in some sense, but like with kids, there's a sort of innocence that provides a truthfulness. There's an unaffected air to the way a kid moves about the world, and I'm sure there's plenty of influence from their environment and whatever else. But I'm just saying that the data that you can gather through the behavior of children is somehow a window into this. And also, it's so weird, like he's, studying children through scientific experiments, but like these are things that you went through as a kid. And if you can remember back that far, you can access some part of this experience. And then you have nephews and nieces, and so do I, and I have a son. It's like we can experience these things as they happen, it's sort of like a traditional wisdom or something like that we actually have in our grasp right in front of us, an opportunity to know the things that we rely on experts and Piaget to sort of prove to us, but it's like, it's actually happening right in front of you. It happened to you. You went through this. So anyway, let's talk about Sisyphus.
And I had this vision one time, and I kind of portrayed it in this image of what the world was like. And I thought, well, it's not a pyramid. It's not a single hierarchy of authority. That's not what it is. It's an array of hierarchies of authority. So you imagine this sort of infinite plane, and in the infinite plane, there's nothing but pyramids. And inside the pyramids, there are strata of people everywhere, far as you can look. Some of the pyramids are tall, some of them are short, they overlap. it's endless. The plane is endless, and those are all the positions to which you could rise. And everybody's inside the pyramid, sort of crammed up, trying to move towards the top. And then there's the possibility of sailing across over top of all of them and seeing how the structure itself works. And that's the eye that floats above the pyramid and that sees the structure itself. And the highest order of being is not to be at the top of the pyramid. It's to use the discipline that you attain by striving towards the top of the pyramid to release yourself from the pyramid and move one step up. And I think that's one of the things that's instantiated in the idea of for example, of the Holy Ghost. So, and I think that's akin to that. That's Sisyphus. And Nietzsche said of Sisyphus, if I remember correctly, that one has to imagine him happy. Well, if there's a rock at the bottom of the hill, then you might as well push it up the hill. And if it rolls back down, well, then you've got something else to do, don't you? You can push the damn rock back up the hill. And there's no shortage of rocks to push up the hill. And that's what we're built for anyways. And so let's go out and push some damn boulders up the hill. And then maybe we could have enough self-confidence and enough respect for ourselves that we wouldn't have to turn to hatred and revenge and try to take everything down, because I think that's the alternative. So he's not weak. That's one thing you can say about him. The same idea represented there, right? That's Atlas, who voluntarily.
It was Camus. It wasn't Nietzsche.
Yes. I never read Camus, but I've been familiar with the concept of Sisyphus, sort of popularized in a nihilistic culture like ours, because you can read that story both ways. And so it's so fascinating. It's like, we must imagine Sisyphus happy is a brilliant observation. It's a brilliant observation because, in a world where the way that you're meant to be is imperfect, striving towards the pinnacle and falling down, if that is all there is, then you can take the nihilistic side and say, yeah, of course, Sisyphus is upset because some stupid god told him that he had to do this, and it's pointless, and what is he even accomplishing anyway? But to observe, I just love what Peterson just said about about that scene, about that myth. The myth of Sisyphus is not that he has nothing, he has no purpose, right? That's not the myth at all. It's that he's being called higher by a spirit. So he may strive and fail to attain whatever stability or certainty that you think there would be with the rock at the top of the hierarchy. But the reason that these two things are put together, I think, because I don't think he said it very clearly here, but it's he put his image of the hierarchy, the array of pyramids, with all of these strata of people, and there's it's an image of everything, right? I think it maps to a kingdom of God sort of idea, and so the reason he puts Sisyphus with that is because he's talking about the natural inclination to rise above your current station. And so there's nothing wrong with rising above your current station. That is a good desire to have. But the reality is you'll never just get to the pinnacle and stay there. He talks about the spirit hovering over, that spirit of the Eye of Horus, or I don't know if he did it right there, but in the lecture, he talks about how it's like the Holy Spirit. And so some aspects of the Holy Spirit are like that, paying attention and hovering above even the kingdom of God, right? So it's higher still than that. And that's the spirit that you want to eventually be transparent to, that you want to be an embodiment of. And so to be crammed into your little sector of this kingdom of God, triangular pyramidic hierarchy structure, is to say that I got the rock to the top. This is where the rock goes. But the reality is that once you push it up to the top, you fall right down to the bottom of the next rung. That's what he's saying. So it's not whatever. It's not maybe what Camus was saying with Sisyphus, but I do see the the beauty of the line that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, because if you don't, then you fall prey to the black hole and the nothingness and the death of certainty, right? Because Sisyphus is aimed at setting the rock on the top. If that's the case, then he's not happy, right? Because he's pushing the rock, he continues to push it up and it falls down.
The thing about you said the death of certainty. The thing that the myth of Sisyphus is really getting at is the certainty of death. Like that's the boulder that we're pushing. Is this certainty that like we're gonna die. And even as we're pushing up this burden, we don't get anywhere even in the process of dying, because we're always dying, and it's also guaranteed that we're gonna ultimately die. Actually, Camus' book is like pretty much a whole like why not kill yourself? That's the point of that book. Like it's really hard. I couldn't get all the way through it, to be honest. But anyways, but what with the whole myth of Sisyphus thing, I think the way this can map on and maybe make some people who are, well, I'll make myself feel better. It's the same thing that it says in Romans 5, the glory in our tribulation. Knowing this, we can glory in our tribulation, because the tribulation brings perseverance, perseverance brings strengthening of character, and character hope, and this hope does not disappoint, because the love of the Father has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. Which I was actually kind of just marveling on that the other day. It's like, that's a weird argument. Like, we know this hope's not going to bring shame upon us because the love of God is in my heart by the Holy Spirit. It's like, yeah, that's not a very good argument. But I mean, that's a fact. So nonetheless, that's actually just a whole side note. But that's Romans 5 right there. It's like the fact that to live is to have tribulation. And that's myth of Sisyphus. It's like pushing, like, under this really taxing curse, pretty much. But in this whole striving for transcendence, in terms of bringing that concept into this conversation, as Jordan Peterson is marrying these thoughts, what Jesus is talking about, being the way, the truth, and life. I am the way to transcend. I'm the way to actually reach the spot that you were made to reach, is actually to give hope, and also to liberate us from death, from the curse, liberate us from the fact that, like, this certain thing that you're under, the shadow of death your whole entire life, I am removing that. And so therefore now you can be certain of and hopefully expect an outcome that doesn't just end with death. Anyways, this is where I would Christianize the whole myth of Sisyphus, is that, like, the caveat I'd put on it with the whole imagining him happy is, like, the reason why Camus is saying that is because he's talking about despair. Like, despair is the subject of his whole entire argument, and that's what Sisyphus is. I mean, that's a pretty despairing circumstance, and there's really no hope of escape, and there's no meaning, there's no rhyme, there's nothing except for this damn rock and this hill. Like, that's all he's got, And so his whole, you got to imagine him happy thing is like that's the nihilistic, like, what's the term for it? It's not just nihilist. It's a certain type of nihilism. I forget. There's a certain term for it where it's like, it is the expression of the postmodern thing where it's like what we're talking about with the last episode, like needing a story, needing a narrative, and the ability to, like, I forgot how exactly we're articulating it, but with the priori and posteriori thing, the priori structure and narrative thing, like, this Camus expression is the quintessential nihilistic postmodern expression of that. There is no meaning, there's no structure, so therefore you can come up with a reason to be happy while you're suffering under this despair and curse of you're gonna die. And that's where I think, with the Christian expression, that it's like, with Christ, his whole thing is that, like, yes, you still have a rock, you still have a boulder, and you still have a mountain, but you actually have hope. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is at the core of the story of the myth of Sisyphus is wrestling with the certainty of death and also the apparent meaninglessness of this thing you're subject to and under the shadow of. And it's like the approach to try to cope with death. That's what that expression, imagine I'm happy, I think in its proper context to get at. But at the same time, this is where I'm saying the application to our lives is that what Jesus gives us is actual joy and not just like an imagined happiness, but it's actually a state of joy in the midst of tribulation. And also the awareness of the telos of the tribulation, the point of the boulder and the rock, and also the guarantee that, I mean, the whole striving for whatever is actually going to be obtained. Like you're guaranteed. We're more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. You know, that's Romans 8, talking about the hope and all things working together for the good of those who love God. And so to not just have an imagined state of happiness, but like, well, now I'm twisting the quote. Like, we have to imagine he's happy, but at the same time, the reason why Camus is saying that is because he's really trying to lay out an argument with how to handle despair, which that's what the gospel is all about, is giving us the antidote to despair, which is the blood of Jesus. He became man and became like his brethren. I said brethren, like I was like like I was like Jamaican or something. And died so he can render him who had the power of death powerless, that is the devil, and liberate all those who by the fear of death were in bondage to sin. And so that's the gospel story, is that like Jesus has liberated us from the fear of death and has liberated us from the genuine despair that we're born into, the genuine hopelessness that we're actually born into, and actually gives us a true cure to this sickness, to this. Anyways, that's the nuance I would add to the whole Sisyphus thing. That's like, anyways, I'm done talking.
Okay.
Later, I guess, because it's a very complicated thing to describe, but it's certainly the thing that when you encounter, the chaos is what you encounter when the Twin Towers fall, right? You remember what that was like, right? So it was September 10th. Well, that was the world. Everyone knew what the world was like. And then it was September 11th, and everyone walked around dazed for 3 days because the buildings fell. But so what? You can see a building fall. You can understand what happens when a building falls. So then what's going on with the being dazed? Well, it's the chaos that underlies our habitable order manifested itself when those buildings collapsed. It was a brilliant act of terrorism. And everyone was frozen and curious, because that's how we react to that sort of thing. It's like the shark. You know, remember that famous movie poster for Jaws with the woman swimming on the top of the water and that terrible Leviathan shark underneath coming up to take her out. Well, that's life, man. That's the world. And now and then you see that. And when something falls like the Twin Towers fall, you remember that the ocean below you, the abyss, right, the primordial abyss, that bloody thing is deep. And you're fragile. And that happens when someone betrays you, and it happens to you when your dreams fall apart. You encounter that chaos again from which the world is extracted, and then you're called upon to act out attention and the word in order to bring the world back into order. And none of that is superstitious. None of that is superstitious. None of that's even metaphorical. It's real. It's more real than anything else. And I think the reason for that in part is that it's been this way forever, right? As long as there's been life, this has been the rule of life. And that's the cosmos, that's reality, that's what we inhabit. And so one of the things, you know, the so-called new atheists, and I don't want to go on a tangent about new atheists, because I think atheists are often remarkably honest and very consistent in their analysis. So, but I just don't think they're taking the problem seriously, man. Like, I don't think they take their evolutionary theorizing nearly with the seriousness that it necessitates. And I don't think that you can dispute the proposition that the longer something has had a selection effect on life, the more real it is. It's the fundamental axiom of Darwinian biology. And I think the Darwinian world is more real than the physical world. That was the argument that I was trying to have with Sam Harris. I didn't do the world's best job of that, although it went not too bad the second time. But it's not something to be taken lightly. It's a very serious, profound, and meaningful proposition. And people act it out and want to act it out whether they know it or not. That's Marduk.
Okay. I misidentified the clip. There's a whole part before where he talks about stuff. But is that good for you? Did that spark anything?
Yeah, it helped me to think about the Sisyphus thing still, because I think that's the thing too about the expression of imagining him happy to a certain extent, because with Christ, it's like for the joy set before him, he endured all things. Like I don't know how happy he was while he's the guy pushing the boulder up the hill, right? Like once and for all, he pushed that boulder and put it to the place where it's meant to be, which is vanquished for all eternity. But also gave us the model that we still have the rock, right? We're still going to die, and we're to face death not as a coward. I think that's the side of it too. It made me think of Marcus Aurelius talks about, with his stoicism about, it's like one of the few times he actually addresses Christianity in his writings. And he kind of says, you're to face death like a warrior, not like those cowardly Christians that like kind of just think of it as something to be happy about because they have imaginations and fantasies about what comes afterwards. And I think, there's something about that, because the way that Christianity is talked about is that it's just, death anxiety antidote. I've brought this up before, and I kind of own that to it is a death anxiety antidote. It's the genuine antidote to the anxiety about death that we all have. And so I don't see that really it's the same thing. I kind of embrace it. Even the term Christianity was meant as a insult, but it's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what it is about. So it's like, that's the proper diagnosis. Yes, it is about death anxiety and vanquishing of it, but it's not to the extent of like, and this is what I'm trying, sorry to finish this thought, is that like the whole imagining him happy thing, I think that's even why modern Christianity kind of, something that I'm seeing that's plaguing is as if it was supposed to be this huge celebration right now, like, or death isn't something to be scared about. And it's like, no, you're supposed to recognize it. You look at the scary aspects of it. It's still there. It's still a scary thing. It's still a menacing thing. And it's not like, okay, let me believe this fairy tale so that, I can kind of put bows and ribbons on this monster. So that then it's like, okay, I'll go on a date with you, monster, and then you know it's gonna take you out. It's like, no, it's still a monster, and like you should be going at it, but with the assurance of victory. But it's not like a happy-go-lucky thing. It's not a sunshine and rainbow thing, and so it's like, yeah, when you're encountering a monster, it's like you're not gonna be happy while you're going to go grapple with the monster. Like I don't think Jesus was very happy with the triumphal entry and all that came about with the climax of his ministry. Even the ultimate climax is like the garden, right? Like he's not happy. He's not happy about what he's enduring, like.
Do you sweat blood when you're happy?
Yes, straight up. And so anyways, so I think with that being said, it's like, just to try to, as he's talking about, the Twin Towers falling and the Jaws picture, like it's making me think of that too, to further flesh out this Sisyphus thing we're talking about, of like anyways, yeah.
The thing that sparked for me was actually when he said 9/11, and he said that it took 3 days to get back to normal. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if there's some correlation with the 3-day thing, because obviously that's a huge biblical motif and centrally located in the resurrection of Christ. So he's crucified, and then 3 days later he rises again. And the image that, or the concept that popped in my head was like that. The crucifixion is many things, obviously symbolic of many things, but it is a representation of the fruit of death, right? There's this comparison in this contrast between the fruit in the Garden of Eden, where Jesus or God says, if you take of this tree and eat its fruit, then you will surely die. And then we have the culmination of that story, the death in Jesus hanging on the tree as the fruit of death. And so it's kind of this like culmination, the fullness, the telos of that pattern of existence, which is sort of operating in a way that is deeply affected, limited, constrained by, shaped by, created by death, right? And so you see the exact inverse of the intended culmination of humanity in that representation. All of the people that are afraid of death use their power to kill life. So it's pretty powerful image there. And it would have been shocking because there are people who are walking with Jesus who are like, this guy is the Messiah, you know, and that is code for this guy means that we don't have to be afraid of death anymore, right? And then he dies and death wins. And so it's like this crazy low point of the plot, and you're like, no way. You know, that's why every Disney movie has the princess or the prince die, because it's like it's replaying the same story. And then 3 days later, he raises up and is alive. And I was like smacked in the face as I was watching this clip. That's the story. That's the story, is that this pattern that we've been talking about for this whole episode, the true speech, the word, the logos that is the pattern of everything that is good in the universe. He subjected himself to the consequences of everything that is bad in this universe, everything that is not him in this universe. He subjected himself to it. So he dies, but he doesn't die. He can't die. It doesn't work like that. And so he revealed the deep magic that C.S. Lewis talks about of like resurrection that's the way that it works. It's the way that it actually truly works. That is what corresponds with the word in the beginning, not death, not the victory of death that we all are afraid of and that we all witness on a daily basis. Not that. That is not what is true about the world. And so that's the thing that goes away. Like death's power to control us and to constrain our behavior, to act in alignment with that, to be more transparent to the spirit of death than to the spirit of the word or the spirit of life, is like, that's the thing that got torn to shreds. Like it was annihilated that in that moment because he rose again. And that's why it's the central point of Christianity. And it's like, I'm sure there are atonement theories and salvation implications and all of these other things. But if nothing else, it tells the true story that you can't defeat life with death. And so there's hope in alignment with the spirit of life.
It's deep. I mean, even like, that's why I do appreciate what he's about to go to. Like, oh, that's why I like this section too. When I watched the whole episode, it's like almost show and tell. It was like, here's a picture of Marduk and this. It's like, you just kind of point out this weird thing. It's like, does a little segment on that. It's like, all right, that's cool. Now here's another super ancient symbol that has a lot of meaning. It has left its residue on the fabric of our society that we all have forgotten about. And it's like kind of, and I think about that too. It's like even Jesus, he says that like those who are of the kingdom of heaven will be like like students of the law that pull old things out and like make them new. I forget.
Collectors, like collectors that
Yeah.
pull out old things and new things. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely botched it. It's not a verbatim quote, but there is an expression like that where it's like, yeah, those who are the kingdom of heaven are who study, who are like scholars in the kingdom of heaven. What is the expression? This is gonna drive me nuts now. Anyway, I'll look it up later. But the ability to be able to bring out this age-old thing and then be like, bring it into the light and it becomes light again. Like things that have been marginalized and cast into the shadows again. It's like to bring it into the light and it becomes light. Um, It's like those who are spiritual praise all things and yet are praised by nobody. It says that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. And so it's like the ability to praise all things. Like, it's just really refreshing. I really appreciate it. This section of, man, I'm a mess. I'm a mess today.
That's all right. It's been 2.5 hours here, so I'm good to leave off here. Anyone that wants to can find the link in the description and head over to this lecture to see all the beautiful imagery and the significance of the symbols that he's pulling from. But I think we did our work here, and I, for one, am grateful for the word that was in the beginning that was here in our conversation. I appreciated it.
Yeah, man. It's good times. Until next time.